It's now 11 a.m. Geneva time. I'm looking at our chair. I think we can officially launch this event. So we are now officially launching this event. Excellencies, dear colleagues, good morning to who is with us at the International Environment House here in Geneva. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is with us on WebEx or is now watching the recording of this event. The Geneva Environment Network has the pleasure to welcome you today for the briefing on the 5th session of the International Conference on Chemicals Management, which will take place in Germany next month. The event will be chaired by Ms. Jacqueline Alvarez, who is the head of the Chemicals and Health Branch of the United Nations Environment Programme. And before I hand over to Ms. Alvarez, and you are formally welcome, let me remind you that the documents presented, the summary, as well as the video of the event will be made available on the webpage of this event. The link is being shared in the chat for who is online or on the screen for who is here in the room with us. Throughout the event, those of you who are online can raise their questions by using the Q&A box. We have a dedicated session to answer this after the presentation if time allows. Finally, let me also add for those who are online that the transcription is available at the bottom left of your screen. Have a look at the current slide, which shows where to access automated transcript in 100 languages. With that, Ms. Alvarez, over to you.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you all of you for being here and those of you that are online. With these things, I never know if to say good day, good afternoons, or what, but welcome. That's, I guess, the easiest part of things. So before giving the floor to Anita, I will share with you a reflection. This morning I was having my coffee and I was saying, what can I say during this briefing that you have not heard? What can I do to maybe move the agenda forward? And then one of my daughters came down, joined me in coffee, and suddenly all of the things started to spark. And I realized immediately the question they always put to me when they were younger. What do you do, ma'am? I don't understand what your work is about. Can you explain? And of course, I always tried. It was very hard for them to really grasp the depth of the things that we are doing. But what I used to explain in simple words came into my mind also this morning. Maybe, is it enough what we are doing? Are we in the right track? Can we do better? And of course, the answer that comes immediately to that is that it's not me alone. I can do a lot. You can do a lot. But here, what really matters is how or what can we do collectively in the best way forward. And we have the chance very soon in front of our hands and in front of our brains and in front of our possibilities. So with that spirit, I really would like to invite you to be very strong, very committed, and really very powerful, because that's what we have at this moment. We have the power to do things better. We have the power to really change and behave in a manner that can be sustainable, safer, and for the future. So with that, I'd like to invite Anita Breyer, fantastic president that we have for our process, that will give you some opening remarks. Over to you, Anita.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around, and thank you, Jacqueline, for the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to express my deepest appreciation, of course, for the privilege of briefing the Geneva Environment Network on an upcoming milestone in ongoing and collective mission to ensure the safe management of chemicals and waste. The 5th International Conference on Chemicals Management, or ICCM5, or as I say, World Chemical Conference, comes at a pivotal time where pollution is recognized as one of the top 3 ecological threats to life on Earth, along with the climate crisis and biodiversity loss. A significant part of the pollution of humans and the environment is caused by the irresponsible or improper handling of chemicals and waste. The conference, jointly organized by UNEP and the government of Germany, is scheduled from September 25th to 29th at the World Conference Center here in Bonn, in the city of Bonn, my hometown. It will mark an unprecedented gathering of high-level policymakers, intergovernmental organizations, civil society, including youth groups, industry actors, and experts from across all sectors, from labor, health, agriculture, industry, environment, nature conservation, science. Together, we aim to lay the political groundwork for ambitious commitments that tackle the far-reaching impacts of chemical and waste amidst the complexities of our present moment. The crucial element for this political groundwork is to create visibility for the importance of sustainable chemical management. All sectors across our societies need to understand their respective responsibilities for creating a chemical safe world. It is not an issue for specialists, some chemists somewhere in a laboratory, or the chemical industry as such. No, action of virtually everyone is needed, i.e. the responsibilities need to be addressed and understood by all sectors and the respective political structures. On September 28th and 29th, we convene a high-level segment with the view to mobilizing international political commitment to the chemicals and waste agenda and to make everyone understand their own responsibilities. The conference thematic roundtables will provide a platform for dialogues among stakeholders, crucially addressing the ways and means of how to concretely implement the new framework instrument. Ladies and gentlemen, with just 1 month left until we meet, time is indeed of essence. Our collective dedication over the years, over the pandemic time, has brought us far. Yet our work on the framework instrument so far remains unfinished. Many of you are directly or indirectly involved in the process. Hence, you know that in Bonn we have very limited time to find common language in a lot of fields that are not yet agreed upon. Of course, the various stakeholders do not share the identical views on each and every level of ambition and same ideas on each and every priority to be set. We have to find solutions for that. And all this in a setting that sometimes I consider to be something like a speed dating. We do have 2 days prior to the ICCM5 to consolidate the text. And at the ICCM5, we do have only very limited time. So let me take this opportunity to call on you for your constructive collaboration and willingness to find a common ground, solutions for our new framework. And let me stress, I think it is key to find the common ground that is our common message to the world on the urgency and responsibilities on chemical management. And I know there are lots of details and issues that we certainly are worthwhile discussing, but we do have to concentrate. And I call on you and use this opportunity, and I will continue calling on that, thinking about the common ground. We will convene in Bonn to complete this task, uniting our expertise and vision. I am convinced that our combined efforts will land with a global framework that addresses the pollution pillar of the triple planetary crisis, and hence calling on the responsibility of high-level political actors and stakeholders to act now and with determination. The time to ignore this task is over, and also the time to refer this task to someone else. Someone else has to take care. The momentum surrounding this framework is palpable, riding on the heels of recent important international meetings, the conferences of the parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, the World Health Assembly in Geneva, the Ministerial Conference on Environment and Health in Budapest, and the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment in Addis Ababa. It is clear that the journey we are embarking on with our ICCM5 meeting in Bonn is part of a larger tapestry of global progress. Let us continue that road. Me as the president, together or in the name of my government, the government of Germany, would appreciate if you all, together with your ministers, consider actively participating in the negotiations of the conference and the high-level segment. We need to have high-level participation, broad participation from all sectors to raise this global awareness for the urgency of our task and to raise the global awareness and understanding of the responsibilities that lies with all of us, with all sectors. Thank you very much, and looking very much forward to see you in person here in Bonn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. You really inspired me. So, and our common message to the world, I think that's a very powerful phrase. And I was thinking as well, as you said, what is our legacy to the world? So thank you very much for the inspiration you gave us. As I was referring, and also as our president said, this is our common efforts and our common job and work. So I will invite my colleague Pierre to present you with some of the very interesting things that will happen during and over these days. So please, Pierre, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. And we have a PowerPoint presentations, if it could be projected. Thank you very much. And thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you very much, the Geneva Environment Network, the GEN, for providing the Secretariat with an opportunity to brief all our stakeholders on the latest preparation and expectations on our way to the 5th International Conference on Chemicals Management. And you've heard our ICCM5 president, and I would like to start this briefing with the conclusions of our latest intersessional process meeting that was held in Nairobi last February and beginning of March. And in Dr. Breyer's own inspiring words, that's the way she concluded our latest meeting. While more work is needed, I feel stimulated by this Nairobi spirit, and more than ever, I am convinced that collectively we will create a powerful international framework that further generates multi-sectoral and stakeholders' commitment and collaborations to deliver concrete actions integrated across sectors and value chains. The delegates at Nairobi meeting welcomed the revised consolidated text presented on the Friday, 3rd March 2023 as a significant achievement, but they agreed to the IP co-chair's proposal to re-adjourn the intersessional process meeting and reconvene 2 days before ICCM5 in Bonn, Germany, on 23rd and 24th September, in order to finalize the intersessional process work. This is a long journey, and we went through, it was at ICCM4 that the intersessional process was adopted, and it started with the first meeting of the intersessional process that was held in Brasilia, in Brazil in February 2017, followed by a second meeting that was held in Stockholm, Sweden in 2018, and the third meeting was held in Bangkok, Thailand in 2019. The IP4, the fourth meeting of the intersessional process, was held in Bucharest, Romania, in last August and September, and followed in 2022, and followed by the Nairobi meeting, which I just mentioned, in Kenya last 27 February and 3rd March 2023. With regards to ICCM5, the fifth session of the International Conference for Chemicals Management and its high-level segment, as just mentioned by Dr. Breyer, will take place in Bonn between 25 and 29 September. There will be 2 days of a resumed IP4 meeting just prior ICCM5, and regional meetings as well will be held on 21st and 22nd September. Capacity building, stock taking, and measurability structure appear within reach during discussion in Bonn in September 23 to adopt the global framework instrument. But significant work will be required on targets and financial considerations that are still filled with bracketed text in order for us to reach the consensus. These are the 2 areas, targets and financial considerations, in the Beyond 2020 framework instruments where ambition is needed and can have the most impact. ICCM5 information and meeting documents are available on our website, ICCM5 websites, and IP4 meeting documents are also available on our side at the dedicated ICCM webpage. What can we expect of our Beyond 2020 framework instrument? It is to be the chemicals and waste pillar of planetary crisis through its unique multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral engagement. It holds significant potential in scaling up collective and whole of society actions, reaching out to key sectoral ministries beyond the environment ones. It is also conceived to bring in circular approaches, life cycle thinking, and benefits valuable to other agendas such as biodiversity, climate change, and human rights. It is to create opportunities and incentives for enhanced actions and engagement of key stakeholders in key economic industry sectors, such as textile, transport, electronics, agriculture and food, and so on, by stimulating actions within and across sectors, in companies, group of companies, and through associations. As such, it is to mobilize adequate and innovative financing on the road to transformations for greener, cleaner, and more sustainable solutions. Few words about the ICCM5 high-level segment. The high-level segment of the fifth session will take place on the 28th and 29th September. It will lay the political foundations for ambitious commitments to address global chemicals and waste impact. It will recognize the multi-sectoral relevance of global chemicals and waste management, high-level participants from all stakeholders and sectors, including but not limited to agriculture, development, environment, foreign affairs, health, industry, and labor. Expected outcome of the high-level segment include a high-level declarations, as well as a stakeholders' pledges, commitments, and partnerships to implement the new framework instrument. Thematics roundtables are being developed to feature dialogue among the high-level stakeholders. More information is, of course, available on our site. Consultations ahead of IP4.3 and ICCM5 meetings. You will remember that the ICCM5 Bureau agreed that the co-chairs, in cooperation with co-facilitators and the Secretariat, develop non-papers. The IP4 consolidated documents remain the basis of discussions at the resumed IP4 meeting in Bonn. These non-papers were developed following a set of briefings that the co-chairs had with the stakeholders. In early September, the co-chairs will present these non-papers to the stakeholders, and there will be an opportunity also on 22nd September to have in-person meetings regionally to review these non-papers. Few words to conclude on logistics information, status of registrations. As of 22nd of August, we have received 520 registrations for the regional IP4 and ICCM5 meetings. An explanatory video has been produced to facilitate understanding with regards to credential accreditations and visa processes available on our website. The Secretariat and the ICCM5 presidency completed the process for identifying ICCM5 exhibition and informed the selected stakeholders accordingly. Finally, due to the large number of requests received to hold side events and the limited number of slots available, the SAICM Secretariat is getting back to those stakeholders who submitted their request during the week of 21st August. You will hear about our plan to accommodate almost all these requests at a satisfactory level. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for the very, very crystal clear presentation on process and also on the level of ambition that we want. Now we have 5 minutes to listen from you, any questions or any things that you would like to say before we go into the stakeholder perspectives. Yes, please, Brazil, and you let me know if there are questions online. Thank you. Yes, Helges.
Good morning to all. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Jacqueline. It's always a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Diana, for organizing all of this with the Geneva Environmental Network. I would like to ask first a question regarding the high-level segment, and I would like to ask what's expected as the content of the Bonn Declaration, how it's going to be negotiated, and what exactly we want to be in the Bonn Declaration itself. When it comes to the high-level segment, I would also ask some clarification as into what level exactly is expected. That is, I understand ambassadors might be a little out of place, but maybe vice ministers and up would be accepted. So those would be 2 questions regarding the high-level segment. And regarding the non-papers, I would also like to understand a little bit more of where they came from and how they were developed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know, Pierre, if you want to answer this.
On the high-level segment, we expect, of course, the highest level representation as possible. I think the adoption of such an ambitious new framework requires the commitment, the support of ministers, and we will have already a lot of private sectors at the top level represented there. There's a lot of commitments in this regard, NGOs as well. With regards to the high-level declarations, we have request submissions from which are being compiled. Our ICCM5 presidency is working on developing the high-level declarations. We can expect that these declarations will feature the main challenges, the main advantages of this new instrument, the level of responsibilities, recognitions of responsibilities required from all stakeholders and their commitments in implementing the new framework. That will be the main element that we can expect of this high-level declarations, which will be discussed and adopted during ICCM5. That will be the main focus that we expect to have with regards to the high-level declaration.
So there are still some discussions within the Bureau on the approach to that. The President received some advice, and they will revert very, very soon on the how and what to expect for the high-level declaration. So the Bureau was very, very healthy and very constructive in providing some views. So all of those things are being considered at this moment. In the case of GRULAC, it was Francisco from Argentina, so maybe he can provide you a little further details, or we can speak after as well, because we have a very long list, but that's an extremely relevant question. Regarding the non-papers, also we can answer, but the technical briefings that are happening very soon will explain a little more the context. They are, as it was mentioned, there to really facilitate discussions. They want to come into certain concepts and conclusions that might be needed to consider, and that's the status at this moment of the non-papers. But of course, it's up to the regions and to the IP4 to also evaluate and assess if they can be useful, how they can be used, and what, if as a totality or not. There are different opinions, and we are asking all of you, if you have already comments to the non-papers, to send them to the co-chairs. That was also agreed in the last Bureau, so that through your regional representatives, so that the co-chairs can also plan accordingly and see what the best potential options to put in front of you could be. So, yeah.
And you will receive a broadcast message from the Secretariat on the virtual briefings early September that are planned in order to provide our coaches to present at a virtual briefing these papers and to engage in a discussion with the respective regions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. There is another question regarding the high-level segment from Japan. It's in very similar tone that the one that Brazil put forward. So if you can please let us know through the chat as well if there is anything else that you'd like to hear from us at this moment, but we hope it's good at this stage. There is another question regarding registrations. That's also ongoing, and we are really planning to start sending the approvals very, very quickly, and some have already been sent to some stakeholders. Yes, that's for the time being. Any other questions here or comments? Yes, please. If you can present your...
Yes, Boris Engelson, a journalist freelance. Don't conclude from my upcoming question that I think these kind of summits are useless. I just try to focus better on what are the crucial points, because I assume that for generations, chemical waste management was a must of anyone graduating in chemical industry, and anyone getting a job wherever would be able to tackle with chemical management. Then, as we were told, it's not a debate for specialists. So for many, many years, these issues have been debated publicly with the civil society, with political parties in the parliament. I do not challenge the idea that from time to time, it is necessary to gather all the stakeholders. But it means that they have to focus on what could not be fixed so far, on the things that the traditional mechanism could not tackle. So what are the most crucial issues which require such gathering and could not be tackled so far?
Thank you very much for that question, and you cracked the nuts. That's the million-dollar question that we have. And I hope that by listening to the different stakeholders' perspectives that are coming, the answer to your question will be shaped. And I will now start to invite in to hear the different perspectives. And one of the big questions is, and I am challenging you all, the speakers that are to come, what is your commitment? What is for you the things that you can do and help shape and change the paradigm, as we have heard? Many things have not worked, many things they have. How do we scale up in the context of what we have? So I'm very honored to invite Shannon, Lisa, from the Global Focal Point for the Youth Platform to give some of the thoughts of the youth in this process. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much. It's certainly a pleasure to be here representing the children and youth perspective on expectations and opportunities during these final stages of negotiations for the Beyond 2020 Chemical Framework. My name is Shannon Lisa, currently the global focal point of the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform. And in just 2 years from launching our constituency in 2021, we've mobilized 900 children, youth, and youth-led organizations from every region of the world to share their experiences and needs for a chemical-safe, toxic-free future. This recently included bringing the first youth delegations to ICCM during the 4th intersessional process meetings in Bucharest and Nairobi, and also recently to the BRS COPs in Geneva. In fact, I'm currently joining you for this briefing from Vancouver, Canada, where the Chemicals Youth Agency is on the ground at the 7th GEF Assembly, pushing for greater political focus and funding to be driven towards chemical pollution. So why do we consider children and youth to be a crucial piece to effective chemicals management? Well, we know that children and adolescents experience more severe and in many cases irreversible risks to their health and development, from the newborn stage to infancy, then in early childhood, to teenage years and in young adulthood. These are all windows in which chemical exposure can alter and interfere with vital physiological processes. We've seen this play out to devastating effect around the world with lead poisoning of children because of its widespread use in paint, fuels, batteries, and drinking water supply systems. But unlike lead, most of the thousands of other chemicals used and disposed have never been comprehensively studied for their impacts on human health, and even less for the health implications on children and youth. We also find that many countries in the global south that are facing the greatest challenges to chemicals and waste management also tend to have the largest proportion of youth in their populations. But far from merely being a vulnerable group or passive beneficiaries of policies, youth are already driving action towards sustainable chemistry, restoration of impaired resources, and pollution prevention in their communities. But this has not always translated to targeted strategies on youth environmental health and engagement in chemical policymaking, especially at the international level. So during IP 4.1 in Bucharest, we were able to propose text on youth engagement and intergenerational equity in the IP co-chair's single consolidated document. And we expanded on this in IP 4.2 with a conference room paper presented at plenary on the need for strategic plans to recognize and respond to the environmental health impacts to children and youth from chemicals and waste. As we prepare for ICCM5, it's certainly an honor to be speaking in this session after Dr. Breyer and Mr. Quiblier, as both have been great supporters of this work to make youth central to the vision and ambition of the new framework. As such, announcing our project being financially supported by the government of Germany, titled Amplifying Youth Rights and Views in Chemicals Governance, we are planning the first ever youth forum at ICCM5. The youth forum will feature panel discussions focused on youth and chemicals across different themes, such as youth-led projects in chemicals management in their communities, and how higher education institutions can build green chemistry and circular economy into their curriculum, along with an intergenerational dialogue between youth, government ministers, and leaders of agencies. We will also be presenting our Global Youth Declaration on Chemicals and Waste at ICCM5, which will be a synthesis of youth messages and demands for the future of chemicals governance, following a series of consultations with young people from every region of the world. And we welcome all youth to contribute to this program. To give you a quick idea of the interest and commitment that youth have to this process, we've received over 1,160 eligible applications from youth to be funded to engage at ICCM5 and are currently finalizing a selection process to fund the travel of 25 or more youth, especially from Global South countries, to Bonn. And to close, I will leave you with this message shared by our constituency members during IP 4.2, which we want to see become reality next month in Bonn. ICCM began through the Dubai Declaration with the vision to protect children and the young unborn child from chemical exposures that impair their future lives. 17 years later, some of those future lives are here with you, standing with you in the room. They are entering young adulthood in the middle of a triple planetary crisis fueled by uncontrolled toxic chemical production and environmental contamination. Behind this children and youth sign, we are the human faces of the need for a bold and effective Beyond 2020 framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And you remind me also of something I heard many years ago, which is that children are not young adults. Children are children. And also youth are youth. It is not that you are young adults alone. So with that, and looking really forward to your global commitment and declaration, and thanking for the interest in this whole process, I am welcoming Jorge right now, a colleague from IMC, a very huge supporter as well of this process and working very closely with all of us. So Jorge, over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. The distance was okay. Okay. I would like to start by saying thank you to the Geneva Environment Network for organizing this event. Thank you, Jacqueline, Secretariat, and colleagues present here for being here. I have the honor to be with you this morning. And for those online, I don't want to take the risk. I just say good day. I just say good day to everyone. In the IMC, we've been discussing this presentation, what message you want to convey to you. And actually, we came to 4 points. I will start with the first point. Essentially, as you know, IMC is committed to help build an ambitious and improve Beyond 2020 framework. IMC recognizes the importance of increasing involvement of all key sectors and stakeholders at ICCM5 and going forward. IMC participating organizations have already integrated these views under their own internal decisions and directives. IMC will come to ICCM5 to contribute to what we hope will be a new and inclusive framework, and look forward to working with all stakeholders in Bonn and beyond implementation. Here's the second point we want to make. Essential features of the ICCM that have worked well to be built further upon in the new instrument. Key among these is the need for the multi-sectoral framework to be more effective. In practice, we have noticed that this requires a whole of government response at the national level to implementation where all interested ministries can equally access the new arrangements and contribute equally on the same footing. We still see that the majority of governments don't have arrangements in place for effective national coordination when it comes to preparation for meetings or implementation. We support national focal points having clearly guidance on what is expected from them, as well as a need for more of a sectoral balance among regional focal points and the Bureau. Some key issues relating to the implementation of the framework remain to be developed and agreed. IOMC proposed the concept of implementation programs, which would include development of a national chemicals infrastructure, as well as engaging with industry sectors and addressing international issues of concern. The fact that countries still lack a robust set of basic national chemicals management arrangements represents a considerable challenge, as without it, they cannot possess sufficient capacity to fully implement SICAM. IOMC members have much experience to offer for implementation arrangements in these areas, but I would like just to be clear that IOMC does not claim capacity in all areas, and it would be key that implementation programs would involve all key stakeholders. Capacity building arrangements under the new instrument remain under discussion and is one area where we look to the new instrument to assist given the gaps that exist between countries. While the SICAM Quick Start program provided initial enabling support under the original agreement, we don't know whether or how the new instrument will effectively support countries in implementation in a similar way. Also of importance are ambitious but viable targets and indicators, and mechanisms for addressing the existing emergency policy issues, as well as new issues of concern. We look forward to further discussing these issues in Bonn in a constructive, inclusive, and forward-looking manner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and for the continuous commitment that is very, very, very important in this process. You have heard a lot. Science needs to underscore all our efforts, all our actions. So we are very happy to welcome Tessa Goberse, who is the coordinator for the Science Policy Panel that is being developed at this moment for chemicals, waste, and prevention of pollution. So Tessa, over to you, and welcome.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and good day to everyone. And many thanks for the invitation to participate in the briefing on the 5th session of the International Conference on Chemicals Management, the ICCM5. My name is Tessa Goverse, and since the 1st of August, I'm the new head of the Secretariat of the ad hoc open-ended working group on a science policy panel to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. In March 2022, the United Nations Environment Assembly decided to convene this ad hoc open-ended working group to prepare proposals for the Science Policy Panel and to begin its work in 2022 with the ambition of completing it by the end of 2024 next year. So while the future panel is still under negotiation, its relationship with relevant key stakeholders is one of the substantive matters to be discussed at the second session of the open-ended working group in December 2023 in Jordan. And it's a pleasure to see that the negotiations of the Beyond 2020 framework will come to fruition this September in Bonn, Germany. And I would like to offer some food for thought on the potential linkages and relationships between the Beyond 2020 framework and the panel. And I would like to start with noting that SICAM and the Beyond 2020 framework share many commonalities with the future Science Policy Panel. Both have a wide scope and emphasize science-based decision-making. The objective of the Science Policy Panel is currently formulated as to strengthen the science policy interface to contribute to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution for the protection of human health and the environment. And this text has been left in brackets with the understanding that future discussions of the open-ended working group may continue to inform the objective. Another common theme is knowledge and information, though with different focuses. The panel has 5 principal functions that were outlined at the first open-ended working group. Undertaking horizon scanning to identify issues of relevance to policymakers and, where possible, proposing evidence-based options to address them. Conducting assessments of current issues and identifying potential evidence-based options to address, where possible, these issues, in particular those relevant to developing countries. Providing up-to-date and relevant information, identifying key gaps in scientific research, encouraging and supporting communications between scientists and policymakers, explaining and disseminating findings for different audiences, and raising public awareness. Facilitating information sharing with countries, in particular developing countries seeking relevant scientific information. And finally, capacity building, noting that the text of this function is yet to be finalized. These commonalities, but with a different focus, of the 2 instruments make the Beyond 2020 framework and the Science Policy Panel naturally complementing each other. The Beyond 2020 framework may be an end user of the panel's deliverables. For example, the Science Policy Panel may conduct assessments that may be used by the Beyond 2020 framework. And meanwhile, the knowledge and data generated during the implementation of the Beyond 2020 framework may be valuable for the panel to carry out its work, such as assessments, knowledge management, and information sharing. The Beyond 2020 framework may also put forward requests that it may wish the Science Policy Panel to look into. So we are delighted to see that the intersessional process consolidated document has already included respective language in the 2. In particular, I would like to highlight that the current text enables bi-directional communication and cooperation between the Beyond 2020 framework and the Science Policy Panel. It will set a model for other multilateral environmental agreements, intergovernmental bodies, and relevant science policy interfaces that the panel will build relationships with. And we also note that there are some similar issues that are being negotiated under both, notably capacity building. We're eager to hear and see the outcomes of ICCM5, which will be useful in informing the second session of the open-ended working group that takes place later this year from the 11th to the 15th of December in Jordan. There is clear international commitment to bring us closer together and connect the Science Policy Panel and the Beyond 2020 framework. This needs to be done on a mutual basis with 2-way interaction. So once more, I would like to thank the organizers of this event to invite me to speak here, and I wish all the delegates much success in finalizing a strong and ambitious Beyond 2020 framework in Bonn, Germany. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tessa. And you remind me of the interconnections, and we are in a system. We cannot address one thing if we are messing with another one. And I have here at my right a member of the Bureau of the Science Policy Panel. So that's part of the glue and the interconnectivity, besides all of you that have been following these processes. But I'm not yet inviting you to talk. I'm inviting now a place where we have learned a lot of things from, and a place where we can build on the experience. So please, David, over to you.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you for organizing this. Of course, thanks to the Global Environment Network for making this all happen. And thanks to Dr. Anita Breyer for leading this process going into the World Chemicals Conference, ICCM5. Having said that, the Stockholm The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions are the three multilateral environmental agreements which share the common objective of protecting human health and the environment from hazardous chemicals and waste. The three agreements are globally legally binding instruments that are complementary to the ICCM multi-stakeholder process for international chemicals management. Ever since the adoption of ICCM, the three conventions have participated as stakeholders supporting the ICCM's overall objective to achieve sound management of chemicals and waste throughout their life cycle to minimize significant adverse impacts on human health and the environment. An example of this complementarity between the BRS and ICCM is in the area of PFAS, which is this group of forever chemicals that are used as industrial and in industrial and consumer products, raising concerns due to their persistence in the environment, potential accumulation in organisms, and association with health issues like cancer, developmental problems, and endocrine disruption. Some of these PFAS chemicals are listed under the Stockholm Convention, but many actually aren't, and these can be addressed through ICCM for environmentally responsible management involving multiple stakeholders, fostering cooperation between these instruments. The BRS has also participated in the intersessional process to ensure that the Beyond 2020 framework does not overlap or contradict the decisions taken by the Conference of the Parties of the BRS conventions, but that they are in effect or factually mutually supportive. With this in mind, the previous meetings of the BRS conventions in May 2023 confirmed their request that the Secretariat of BRS, that it enhance its cooperation with the Secretariat of ICCM. And of course, we're happy to do so. BRS collaboration extends not only to the ICCM process, but also to the ongoing negotiations, other ongoing negotiations, the Plastics INC and the OEWG to establish the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste, and Pollution Prevention. All these processes are key to support and achieve the proposed post-2020 goals and targets, and the BRS is supporting all of them. I would also like to add that the BRS cooperates actively with the Minamata Convention Secretariat on the programmatic level, as well as supporting each other in the Secretariat for our meetings of the Conference of the Parties. Furthermore, the Executive Secretary, Mr. Rolf Payet, is actively engaged in the high-level event closely linked to ICCM5, and that is the second Berlin Forum on Chemicals and Sustainability. The Berlin Forum is a high-level event organized by the German Ministry of Environment, which holds the ICCM5 presidency, as you know. Our executive secretary is moderating a two-day virtual event for the second time, and it will take place on 4 and 5 September with over 35 ministers and other high-level representatives from multiple stakeholder groups to discuss ways for a just transition towards a pollution-free planet. I would also mention as an aside that the BRS Secretariat will be making available 5 of our staff to actually support the Secretariat of ICCM5. So you'll see some BRS folks in Bonn as well. In terms of BRS's expectation for ICCM5, although progress has been made toward the target 12.4 of the Sustainable Development to achieve the environmentally sound management of chemicals and waste throughout their life cycle, not all has been achieved, obviously, by 2020. This not only affects SDG 12, but the enhancement of other Sustainable Development Goals as well. Chemicals and waste have a key cross-cutting nature, and its sound management contributes to the overall overcoming global and local challenges, enables the achievement of several other goals of the 2030 agenda. These include, for instance, Goal 2 on sustainable agriculture, Goal 3 on good health and well-being, Goal 6 on clean water and sanitation, Goal 11 on sustainable cities and communities, Goal 14 on life below water, and 12 on responsible production and consumption. In addition, the sound management of chemicals and waste is a precondition to address the triple planetary crisis caused by climate change, pollution, and biodiversity. For biodiversity, pollution by chemicals and waste are among the key drivers to biodiversity loss. For climate change, there are several opportunities to address climate change through the sound management of chemicals and waste. In fact, there's been a document that's been done jointly with the Minamata Convention Secretariat and BRS, which you can consult on our website, brsmeas.org. And it's on interlinkages between chemicals and waste, biodiversity loss, and climate mitigation, and the potential for coordinated action. So I encourage you to have a look. In closing, as one of the stakeholders of ICCM5, BRS expects these negotiations will successfully lead us to our shared objective to protect human health and the environment from hazardous chemicals and waste. The BRS Secretariat will continue to actively contribute to this process, ensuring coherence and avoiding duplication of efforts with agreements already made under the BRS conventions and according to the mandates given to the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. And if I can slightly correct you, we will not see folks of BRS, we will see friends of BRS at ICCM5. So thank you for that. Now I'm turning over to Servet, which you also know very well, to give the perspectives from a different entry point, and it is the private sector entry point. So Servet, over to you.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and good day to everyone. Thank you for inviting ICCA. My name is Servet Gören. I work for the European Chemical Industry Council, CEFIC, which is one of the many members of ICCA. And while you may only see me representing ICCA, I have also colleagues attending the call from South Africa to Japan to Brazil. So we are all committed also for this event, but also committed to make, as Dr. Breyer mentioned, the new framework, an ambitious new framework. I can only relate to what Jacqueline mentioned, to keep it simple, and I would also therefore like to focus my remaining 4.5 minutes to explain how we as industry see what the key elements should be of the new framework that will be negotiated in a month's time. First of all, the red line is indeed, and I think Jorge also hinted to that, it is to close the gap between developed and developing countries in their capacity to manage chemicals safely. With this red thread in mind, we do believe that the new framework should first and foremost foster meaningful collaboration between the stakeholders. And this is also what Dr. Breyer also hinted to, which we full-heartedly support. This is not an exercise one stakeholder can do alone. We need to connect, and the new framework should provide for a mechanism that meaningful partnerships are forged. I can only speak on ICCA behalf. We have meaningful partnerships. I can only mention the Latin American Regulatory Cooperation Forum, where we connect the regulators in the Latin American countries with industry stakeholders to really help advancing on the journey to eventually come to a basic chemicals regulatory framework. I think, Jorge, you used robust chemicals management arrangements, but it's the same journey. We have a similar collaboration with ASEAN, so where we connect regulators to industry. And I could only invite everyone, and I know that many stakeholders have their own partnerships, to foster these meaningful partnerships. So that's the first key element. The second element is that we need to have a system that also fosters tangible outcomes, tangible deliverables on the ground. And here comes in indeed the targets and indicators discussions, which we full-heartedly support, which needs to be smart. They need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they need to be achievable, they need to be realistic and timely. So in that vein, there needs to be some homework to do to get these targets in this smart way, and to have also each stakeholders taking account and responsibility what they can do to contribute to the safe chemicals management. A third pillar is to foster commitments. Yes, we are in a voluntary framework, but this can go hand in hand with commitments on the political level and commitments also at the stakeholder level. I can mention another meaningful collaboration that we are doing together with countries in Africa, where we try to have GHS implemented in a certain timeline, where we would need political commitment, where we would also need other stakeholders' commitment. And this is something, another example that we do together with key stakeholders, including the EU Commission, including the African countries, and including industry. Now, we are convinced that these elements can be best served if the new framework would also start work on what we call a capacity building hub. I'm not going to deviate too much. We have been presenting this concept for the last 2 years. We have, and thank you to IEMC to provide us with some space to present it again. We have also submitted an InfDoc on this topic, and we are aiming to have a dedicated webinar also before IP 4.3, because we believe that there needs to be a mechanism, hub, a marketplace, a platform, it doesn't matter what name you call, to connect the needs to the offers. This is also a platform that will foster partnerships, that will foster tangible outcomes. And it will also have a project progress tracking, where the outcomes and knowledge of the projects done can be also tracked and kept, which will also spur regional collaborations. So all in all, I would invite all of you to really help us shaping this idea further. It's by no means a sole industry action. We would all need to pitch in if we would like to have a matching exercise that work. I will leave it with this, and I hope I kept it within the 5 minutes time, but I'm happy to take any of your questions, and thank you again for providing us today with space.
Oh, thank you very much. And I guess that we all have too many things to say, and we are very enthusiastic with this process. So thank you for keeping the time, which I know it's extremely difficult. Now I'm moving to another very strong person in this agenda that has been guiding us with a lot of concepts that they came maybe old and new, in the sense that we have been hearing them, but now we have the potential to really include them in this framework. So Rory, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for the opportunity to present the International Trade Union Confederation position and the position of unions worldwide. ITUC represents 190 million workers worldwide in 167 countries and territories, and has 337 national affiliates. So we have quite an impressive global spread. And risks posed by chemicals are a big deal for many of our members. I mean, for many, literally a life and death issue. So we are strongly committed to the SACEM process. However, I know it will feel as we sit here neck deep in papers and non-papers and CRPs and InfDocs and draft resolutions that there's a daunting task ahead, and as the clock runs down. However, it is worth saying that we have achieved a great deal already. I've seen in my time on the Bureau and involved with this process an evolution in understanding, a broader base away from environment towards multi-sectorialism develop, and it's been quite extraordinary. So I want to thank the presidency, the co-chairs, the secretariat, and the delegates and all those involved for the efforts they put into make this a more broad-based, multi-sectorial, multi-stakeholder instrument. I think it now gives us an unprecedented opportunity to reach a silo-busting, broad-based and genuinely groundbreaking agreement on chemicals and waste. So why is it particularly an issue for trade unions? Well, because we're in the exposure front line, from mining to extraction to manufacture and use to disposal. Our exposures are greater and longer, and they continue in our communities downwind and downstream. We've got 24 hours a day of chemical exposure, and workers pay a high price. The International Labour Organization estimates 1 million workers die each year as a result of exposure to hazardous chemicals, 1 every 30 seconds. Hundreds of millions more lose their health and suffer hardship as a consequence. And so this is why it's always been a priority for us to fight for protection of workers from harms at work, including chemicals. Last year, we secured recognition that occupational health and safety should be a fundamental principle and right at work, meaning that all ILO's 187 member states have to abide by basic legal baseline principles. Convention 155, one of the named conventions, has chemical health and safety within its scope. We also have specific chemicals, which are global laws, UN laws on chemicals, Convention 170, on carcinogens 139, and on major accident hazards, Convention 174. And we are about to start negotiating, hopefully, for a new chemical protocol to bring all these instruments up to date. And of course, we have the ILO fundamental rights, the right to freedom of association, collective bargaining, freedom from child and forced labour, and freedom from discrimination that underpin what we do in the workplace around chemicals and other issues. So why we're interested in SACEM when we've got these binding rights, given that SACEM is non-binding and so doesn't in theory have teeth? Well, basically laws conventions set a legal baseline, but a new SACEM can aim higher. It can be and must be ambitious and aspirational. But this can't just be a slogan. Everyone's using the words. It has to be recognised in the text. It has to be a requirement. So we need an agreement that is genuinely multi-sectoral and stakeholder, and it must get us all out of our silos and reflect the best already agreed language and expand on it. That does leave us with significant issues to address. One is a legacy of SACEM having been effectively an environment, a UNEP-led process, and now I think we're still at what is basically a UNEP plus other. And in this regard, it was good to hear from Jorge and IOMC about the commitments for IOMC members to ensure that this is a properly multi-sectoral process. However, in practice, whilst there's been a nodding acceptance of the importance of incorporating health and labour and other perspectives, we've actually seen some of the resistance when negotiating text, including already agreed language against already agreed language from operational UN binding agreements. I mean, this is a problem for us because if SACEM is a non-binding agreement, it can't be allowed to undercut or undermine existing normative agreements, effectively laws we have worldwide. So for us, this means we have certain checklists we need to include within SACEM. It has to be a real-life document that reflects the work we do. One is it should cover a just transition to from environmentally damaging to sustainable, decent work in line with the SDGs, and that includes SDG 8, which was the one missed out by our friend from the BRS. And this isn't just about clean energy, it's about addressing all the issues of concern, not just the 19 named ones that crop up at work. We have our own on top of that list, asbestos, silica, and many others. It must also cover human rights, protection from the harms by chemicals and waste, reflecting the UN General Assembly, UN Guiding Principles, and other agreements we already have in place. It must respect ILO fundamental rights at work, because it was mentioned before on the SPP discussion, that knowledge is important. Well, knowledge alone isn't the answer. Just knowing that something is going to kill you isn't enough if you face being ignored, victimized, or fired as a result of raising concerns about it. We've got to ensure that all parties are engaged and that all tools in the toolbox are engaged. So that includes, as Anita said, supply chain responsibility, investor relations, public procurement, multilateral development bank agreements. And it will need resources. And that doesn't just include hubs, as mentioned by ICCA. It also includes dedicated and accessible finances. They've been necessary to support effective project work and capacity building, pointing to some mythical magic money tree somewhere else where we can get resources just doesn't hack it. SACEM needs its own resources. It needs a quick start program on steroids, and it needs a fund. And so we've got to look at ways we can agree that. If SACEM is going to effectively break out of its environmental bubble, then the language must be relevant to all the sectors, including health and labour. Again, it was encouraging to hear from IOMC about that, but it's also important that IOMC has the capacity to do it, and it's concerning that it's identified there is a lack of capacity at the moment to broaden its involvement to the extent that might be necessary. So we see IOMC5 as a giant step towards securing broader engagement, because if the language is more inclusive, if the organisations involved are broader, then we can encourage further broader involvement. The other factor that we see as critical is ensuring that social determinants in health are reflected in the agreement, because if you leave those worst affected out of the agreement, then they will go by the wayside and we will not have the impact we desire. That includes race, gender and class. If you're the worst affected, it needs specific efforts and language to ensure we have properly informed preventive strategies. It cannot be relegated to a statement in the introduction, but it must run throughout the entire body of the agreement. So for us, as the clock runs down, the biggest challenge is agreeing anything, and that will require effective leadership. SACEM, as a non-binding agreement, can and only will be relevant if it is properly aspirational, ambitious, reflecting and going significantly beyond the labour, health and environmental rights and duties already enshrined in existing agreed language, including national and international laws, and that would include ILO conventions, BRS treaties, WHO documents and treaties, and documents elsewhere. It means that agreement reached in Bonn cannot be allowed to set a lowest common denominator. It means that we cannot confuse consensus with unanimity. It means we've got to agree things together. Done right, it is unlikely that anyone will get everything they want from this agreement, but everyone should get something that they value. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, and I think that we all have very positive will to not come to the less common denominator, as you were saying, and that's where commitment is needed and where discussions are needed and where also strategies are needed. So thank you for highlighting that very strongly. I have been bombarded by Diana with a lot of questions in the chat. Some of them are very powerful and very good. I don't think we will, or we might have the time here to answer, but what we can do is commit to refer back to you on the substance and also on those that are more related to process and logistics. Having said that, the next speaker in my list is also somebody that you know very well, which is Susan is her name, and she has also been with us for a very long time in this agenda. So Susan, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and thanks to the Geneva Environmental Network for organizing today. It is a privilege to speak with you today on behalf of the health sector, civil society, looking towards the final lap of finishing the successor agreement to the Beyond 2020 instrument. And health sector is critical to ICCM as ICCM is critical to health. This unique and useful process that will allow us to move forward on issues that are not addressed in other instruments. It is difficult to follow my very erudite colleague, Rory O'Neill, with whom in general the health sector agrees. And in fact, those of us who work in health can include trade unions of health workers, as well as health professionals, as well as ministers of health. We are all considered health workers, but in the civil society, we are made up of health professionals, hospitals, healthcare organizations. And indeed, Healthcare Without Harm, my organization, was founded 27 years ago when it was determined in research that medical waste incineration were either the #1 or #2 source of dioxin pollution in North America, which is a reminder that there should be no exclusion of the health sector on humanitarian grounds as we're looking at the sound management of chemicals and waste. We do use a lot of chemicals, some of which are pharmaceuticals and included as an emerging policy issue that needs to move forward in the Beyond 2020 instrument. Next slide. I do have a couple of slides just to remind us foundationally of some of the pieces that have moved forward and, as Rory indicates, have led to a great deal of progress. However, we have not achieved this goal of that chemicals are used and produced in ways that lead to the minimization of significant adverse effects on human health and the environment. And that is in large part because of a lack of financing and a lack of resources for its implementation. Like Shannon, who spoke earlier, yesterday I was together with Judith Torres, our co-chair of the IP process in Vancouver at the Jeff Assembly, looking for additional resources to support the implementation of SciCam. Next slide. And as part of the progress moving forward, a reminder that it was 10 years ago that we adopted the health sector strategy at ICCM, and that emphasized the need to fully engage the health sector, for which we've made a great deal of progress, but need to really integrate, as Jorge was discussing, at the country level with national focal points to work together on sound management of chemicals and waste. Another milestone in the progress, next slide, was that of the development of the WHO roadmap on chemicals, which, as we understand, based on the WHO resolution that will be revised later this year following ICCM5. And this roadmap has been raised repeatedly during the negotiations for the Beyond 2020 agreement as an example, not only that is a guidance and direction for stakeholders of health to be active in SciCam and working with other sectors, but also as an example that other sectors could use to guide their program and involvement in the sound management of chemicals and waste. That said, it's not yet referred to directly in the Beyond 2020 instrument as it should be. Next. More recently, in May of this year, the World Health Assembly passed a resolution on the impact of chemicals, waste, and pollution on human health. And I won't go through this specifically, but want to say thank you to the co-sponsors of that resolution from Canada, Colombia, Ecuador, the EU, Mexico, Monaco, Peru, Switzerland, and Uruguay, that ended up with additional co-sponsors, 40 in all at the World Health Assembly, with no opposing views. And it called on WHO and member states to strengthen the implementation and activity within SciCam, and also reinforcing WHO's involvement, health involvement in the plastics treaty negotiations, another place where Healthcare Without Harm has indicated there should not be exemptions for the health sector. We have a lot of opportunities to reduce and eliminate plastics and the chemicals in plastics that we use in the health sector. Next slide. Reference to the Science Policy Panel and the importance of the sound management of chemicals, waste, preventing pollution for health. And these slides will be available. Again, I won't go through them in the interest of time. Next slide. I just wanted to call attention to last Saturday when the G20 met to commit to prioritize sustainability with climate resilient health systems, including areas of water, sanitation, and waste as a part of sustainable health systems that will be facilitated through the WHO Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health. Next slide. And this is the last slide, just to say, as my colleagues have spoken before, we need to maintain and strengthen existing language related to the Dubai Declaration on precaution, on extended producer responsibility, to maintain and welcoming the CRP from IOMC on the issues of concern and emerging policy issues, with a process for setting criteria to measure progress that is SMART criteria, as Servat was talking, and to support national focal points to become even more collaborative at the national level and working with sectors. And then moving forward, recognizing the progress made at IP 4.2 in Nairobi on principles and approaches, looking forward to that deliberation, and the importance of human rights gender inclusion, social equity, and multi-sectoral participation in the governance of the new instrument that focuses on primary prevention, not just managing chemicals, but identifying hazards and eliminating exposure to hazards, whether it's in the workplace or in communities. And as I mentioned before, an explicit reference to the WHO roadmap on chemicals, as well as Rory spoke about, ILO's occupational safety and health as a fundamental principle and right, so that we can understand the transparency of chemicals in products so that we can act to protect human health and planetary health. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan, for also connecting the dots. And this is broader than us. And you referred to WHA, you referred to the G20. These discussions are on the table. So we have all the ingredients that we need to have a superb celebration at ICCM5 when we gobble the adoption of the new framework, hopefully. So I'm now looking at Gohar from IPEN. Gohar, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity, and greetings from Yerevan to everyone. I represent Armenian Women for Health and Healthy Environment, NGO SACEM Focal Point from Armenia, and I speak on behalf of IPEN, a global network of more than 600 public interest and civil society organizations in more than 120 countries. IPEN is committed to SACEM and to Beyond 2020 instrument that facilitates the achievement of the sound management of chemicals. For example, our NGO works successfully with the government, participating in national SACEM-related discussions and contributing through awareness raising and other initiatives to tackling priority issues of concern for Armenia, such as highly hazardous pesticides, lead in paint, endocrine disrupting chemicals in children's products, etc. Without SACEM, this opportunity to work with the government wouldn't have existed. For more information on our work, you can visit our website. In the next slide, we will have a look at, again, at the goal of 2020, as Susan also mentioned. And in 2002, heads of state at the World Summit for Sustainable Development recognized that the sound management of chemicals is essential if we are to achieve sustainable development, including the eradication of poverty and disease, the improvement of human health and the environment. Hence, they made a commitment to achieve the 2020 goal. What is the reality today? The 2020 goal was not achieved, and the chemicals waste issues are getting worse, as noted by numerous reports and by independent scientists, highlighting how chemicals are affecting our ability to reproduce and that we have crossed planetary boundaries. The reasons are that industry and governments did not sufficiently commit to achieving this goal. Lack of resources has been a central factor. Limited financial support, difficulty in accessing finances, and the fact that industry takes the profits from the continued use of hazardous chemicals and places the burden on the public, as it is documented in the Cost of Inaction report. Let's be clear, without sufficient resources, progress will be limited. Governments should commit to a new global fund for chemicals and waste, similar to commitments made for biodiversity and climate. On a positive note, although progress has been limited on SACEM, there have been significant commitments from governments in the past few years, including the recognition of the human right to a healthy environment, the global biodiversity target set in 2022, which includes significant reduction of the risk from chemicals and pesticides. And in the next slide, I will show the expectations of IPEN from ICCM5. And we think that there is real opportunity to begin to get controls on toxic chemicals used and released directly to the environment and the workers. Beyond that, SACEM and ICC5 preparations, as you know, suffered from COVID, which made the negotiations longer and we lost momentum. In order to achieve success at ICCM5, government should make a renewed ambition commitment to the sound management of chemicals, both in their high-level declaration and through negotiating an ambitious vision and objectives to achieve a toxic-free future. Then continue action on issues of concern. We should definitely keep the EDC, transparency of chemicals and products, etc. And above all, in particular, commit to a global alliance on highly hazardous pesticides. This could be a real win from ICCM5 because many of these pesticides have been already banned and successfully substituted in many countries. Then we think more resources should be allocated for implementation. More is needed to secure real funding. And multi-sectoral engagement and the framework to utilize the UN system more effectively is key. As has been already mentioned, African Ministerial Conference on Environment in Addis Ababa adopted a comprehensive document outlining the expectations of the region from the ICCM5. IPEN supports the African position, which is very important as the region of 54 countries is not a major producer nor exporter of chemicals or pesticides, and this high-level outcome is significant for ICCM5. For details of IPEN position, you can see in 12 document on SAICM website. And in the next slide, we will see the road ahead of us. So it has been a long negotiation, but there are only one clear pathway, as you can see, that leads to a new, strengthened multi-stakeholder framework that could achieve the sound management of chemicals. The alternative roads lead to more chemical that are toxic, more pollution, more health hazards. Therefore, ICCM5 is an opportunity that governments should not miss. And in the next slide, you will see the group of committed people from IPEN participating organizations who thank you for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I will keep with me the opportunity we should not miss. That's a very powerful message. And thank you very much for the graphics as well. Very, very enlightening. Now I have as a next speaker, Marcos. And Marcos, I think I met you first time at Escazú in Santiago de Chile, COP1. Maybe I forgot some other opportunity, but when I talk about Escazú, access to information, human rights comes very, very quickly to my mind. And without any willingness to change what you are going to share with us, there is a question I picked from the chat, which is asking, is there data on implications of human rights on chemicals and waste with regards to access of information? So I leave that question in your mind as well when you go through the message for us here today. Over to you, Marcos.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thanks to the Geneva Environment Network for the invitation to join you today. My name is Marcos Orellana. I'm the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations on Toxics and Human Rights. And today, in the few minutes that I have, I wish to put across two messages. One is that we're in a once-in-a-generation opportunity to craft a vision and a framework that addresses the toxification of the planet. We talk about the triple planetary crisis, we hear about it, but have we really recognized that the toxification of the planet is an emergency situation like the climate change emergency or like the biodiversity loss emergency? Sometimes I get the feeling that we have not. And when we're confronted with the evidence on the massive adverse impacts of chemicals on workers around the world, on male fertility rates declining and approaching zero, on the individual and collective intelligence coefficients declining and thus depriving humanity from the intelligence that we need to overcome the problems that we face. And all of this is in addition to the sheer number of premature deaths from air pollution, from water pollution. It seems to me we're a far cry from recognizing the global dimensions of the problem that we're facing. And in this same regard, have we recognized the global environmental injustices that result from the toxification of the planet? A clear case in point are the double standards in the export of banned highly hazardous pesticides. But broadly speaking, the widespread and systematic infringement of human rights that is resulting from the current affairs is simply untenable. Against this rather bleak background, my second point is that the International Conference on Chemicals Management is indeed expected to deliver a robust framework. And in that regard, human rights I will argue, are key to an effective and legitimate outcome. So the vision of the instrument, the framework, needs to be anchored in human rights. This echoes or aligns with what President Anita Breyer spoke about, a common message and common ground. A couple of rights that particularly come to mind are the right to science and the need to align measures to the magnitude of the threat. Here we see, we're beginning to see the seeds perhaps of a certain co-option of key terms such as circular economy that are being applied or implemented in ways that harm workers or communities. And similarly, the transfer of polluting recycling industries to the global south. So the right to science is a safeguard against disinformation, against greenwashing, and against the chasm that separates the measures that should be in place in regards to the science. And the second right that comes to mind, recently recognized by the UN General Assembly last year at the global level for the first time, is the right to a healthy environment and the promise that nobody gets left behind. And there, the vocabulary of minimizing significant adverse impact is problematic because it begins to normalize the idea that some people will be harmed. And that is incompatible with the rights-based approach, the promise that no one is left behind, that everybody has the right to a healthy environment. So the vision should not regress from the Dubai Declaration, but a vision by itself is not sufficient. There need to be tools to articulate human rights. The right to information, as you mentioned, Jacqueline, is a key right there. Emissions, impacts, of course, chemicals in products, building that political awareness in consumers is key. But then, of course, accountability. ICCM has been described as a safety net sometimes to catch issues that fall in the cracks of MEAs. But has the framework been able to prevent exposure? Are there consequences when targets are not met? That is where perhaps the Universal Periodic Review of the Human Rights Council can offer important insights in terms of design. I'm out of time, so I will simply conclude pointing that I'm very much looking forward to ICCM5 because the toxification of the planet and humanity demands bold and decisive action now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcos, very, very much. Before going to the closure, I would need to ask you if you can stay with us for another 5 minutes because we have a questions and answers. If that's okay, then I'll pass the floor to Felix. We are already over 2 minutes. To Felix. Oh my God. Okay, you are the same person. Yes, and while I'm waiting some questions, there is one particularly on proposals, and maybe it's important to clarify that it was agreed in Nairobi that for IP 4.3, which is happening Saturday and Sunday, no new proposals will be accepted as CRPs, meaning that there will be no room for getting new conference room papers during IP 4.3. Of course, the conference will have its own dynamics, and it is expected that new information or new proposal, or maybe not new proposals, or proposals can be put on the table on Monday morning after the conference starts. So any of those proposals can be submitted to the Secretariat before, so they can be formatted and processed as needed, but they will not be shared or shown before ICCM5. The period for information document is also no longer available, so the only chance is at ICCM5. There will be briefings, there will be regional meetings, so there will be a lot of opportunities for discussions at that moment. So I don't see any questions here, so maybe I give to you, and I will say your name correctly. I'm so sorry, Michelle. But with this thought as well, and this question for all of you. What is our legacy? What do you want your children, grandchildren, or people in the future to tell about you? Following what Marco says, this is a lifetime opportunity. So what is our legacy? Please keep that in mind. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. And on behalf of the Swiss government, I thank the GEN for having organized this meeting. And I thank the panelists for having shared this useful information and their views. And of course, I thank all the participants here in Geneva and online for having joined this session. My name is Michel Chiren, and I'm with the Federal Office for the Environment in Switzerland. So it was said, right, in these remaining days and hours before the adoption of the new framework, let's keep in mind that we have so far, and when I say we, I mean the international community, not reached the goal of minimizing adverse effects of chemicals on human health and the environment. And as you have just said now, Jacqueline, with the new instrument, we must therefore create something together that allows us to get there quickly and address current pressing issues jointly. We must build on existing and grow in scope and, of course, in political commitment, and most importantly, take action. Certainly we must, and it was also said by several panelists, not fall behind ICCM and the Dubai Declaration, but we must adopt a better ICCM, a ICCM Plus, a framework on chemicals and waste with relevance to many different types of stakeholders and sectors. We need to keep the work that was already done and not lose important progress that we have made. And that also means keeping existing expertise and commitment and existing identified issues of concern. Because a question from the audience was, what are some of the main issues that are on the table? And I would say that if we have not made to date enough progress to address issues like chemicals in products, endocrine disrupting chemicals, highly hazardous pesticides, nanotechnologies, and other issues that we have already identified, then clearly we need to do more to make progress and achieve the goals. And we can do more by identifying and intensifying action towards reaching specific targets and milestones, by including more stakeholders, and by including the existing expertise, in particular from the Chemicals and Waste Cluster and IOMC organizations here in Geneva that have been working on the topic, and also by including the latest scientific information and including the information coming from the upcoming science policy panel that we also heard about today. We also can make progress by giving, in the new global framework, the private sector a role to play, as it has not had the necessary presence in the past in ICCM, according to the independent ICCM evaluation. The new target framework should be comprehensive as to map the elements of sustainable chemicals and waste management so that the different stakeholders can address and contribute jointly the issues and work towards these common goals. Of course, all that have been involved in the process know that in Bonn our time will be very short to lift existing brackets and have the instrument ready and adopted. So we will have to make efforts to come up to an ambitious consensus, and all documents, and they were mentioned, already prepared, including the non-papers, will be very useful to this end. And now at the end of my 5 minutes, I want to come back to the beginning of this session when Jacqueline and her daughter had coffee, and It was a question, where are we heading to? Just to reiterate once more that the adoption of the global framework at ICCM5 is our possibility to jointly address over the next years several pressing issues. And this is relevant for decades to come. And of course, not just for us, but for future generations. So we are, of course, looking forward to working together to achieve a great success in Bonn at ICCM5. And with this, thank you very much. And back to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you. And it's up to you. We are 10 minutes after, if everybody can, for sure. Yes? Okay, yes. Go ahead.
One question to Michel Chiren and to Servet Goren. Will you attend the CHEMCON conference, which is a yearly conference, but a trade conference on this kind of issues? I have bad hearing, so while most of you were talking, I tried to keep track of the topic, and I realized there is a yearly trade conference called CHEMCON. And my last question is to Susan Wilburn. She said that chemical management and production without harm has not been reached so far. Of course, there are countries where nothing works for reasons which we will not discuss here and which we have discussed much in the past. But in countries where things work, can she give examples of unsafe production and management?
So may I suggest as well that some of these questions are taken offline? Because I guess they are very powerful, very important, but also very lengthy. Okay. 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 Understood.
Drop the questions today.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So my suggestion is that we just have a few moments outside as well. We have a conversation about certain topics, and we continue, because this is not the end of our journey. It's part of the things that we are doing. And I always need to apologize at the end, because I take for granted the work that Jen does for us. So thank you, Diana and team, for being always supportive and doing a fantastic job. And I happen to realize that after I hear it once and again. So, sorry, we are part of the same team at the end of the day. So thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you in Bonn. And remember, what is our legacy? Don't forget about that. Each of us has something to do.